Hey mamas, we know you're not sitting around at home anymore like we were earlier in the pandemic, so we're going to be changing up the show now to fit your needs. We'll be transitioning to giving you shorter golden nuggets from our interviews posted on the Maui Mama Facebook page and Facebook groups. But if you prefer, you can see the whole interview on YouTube on the Chew on This Media channel. And you can also see full interviews on Akaku Channel 54. We'll keep you posted on these changes as we adapt to this post-CoronaMama phase. Stay tuned to the end of the show to learn how to make this Valentine's Day Chinese New Year craft and recipe. And now for our Actions of Aloha segment. We recognize the We Love Hawaii Food Project once more as they continue to give away thousands of dollars in food gift certificates to Maui families. The We Love Hawaii Food Project is now helping out MauiHub.org by donating $1,000 a month to give away fresh, organic, locally grown produce to needy families. And as you heard about on a previous CoronaMama episode, the nonprofit gives away $100 gift certificates to people to shop at the Hawaiian Moon's natural food store. Where did all this money come from? The Ama Charity and a GoFundMe campaign has helped the We Love Hawaii Food Project feed over 300 families with 6,000 healthy home-cooked meals. Wow. The founders of the project, Gary Marks and his family, say they'll continue to give away the rest of the donations as long as the money lasts. Mahalo to the Marks family, Hawaiian Moon's Natural Food Store, and MauiHub.org. And hey mamas, did you know about this great new outdoor farm stand and kitchen that recently opened up in Kula? What I love about it is that it's perfect for food to go or a quick bite, especially with young kids. And great during these COVID times with outdoor benches where you can eat breakfast or lunch. The produce is all locally grown right there on the biodynamic farm, and you'll also find other locally grown organic items. The Maui Bees Farm Stand sells locally made yummy treats, home-bottled fermented foods, handmade goods, even locally baked organic sourdough bread. Yum. And of course, their own Maui Bees honey. Now, full disclosure, I have been a customer of Maui Bees for years when they offered a pick-your-own produce program, and the owners, Mark and Leah Damon and their son Aaron, are salt-of-the-earth kind of people who kindly decided to support the CoronaMama Show. Thanks so much, dear friends. Here's a sample of the menu that changes daily, and next week we'll introduce you to their fermented foods and its microbiome goodness. Be sure to let them know that you heard about Maui Bees from the CoronaMama Show to get your 10% discount. And now for our main segment, continued from last week on digital wellness. Healthy tech strategies for teens with Teodora Pavkovic. She's a child psychologist, parenting coach, and digital wellness consultant. And she just moved from New York to Oahu. Welcome to Hawaii, Teodora.
What are the reasons why you want it? So, how do you want to feel when you use this? What is it? What kind of social objectives are you trying to achieve? And then are there different ways in which you could do the same? And so some parents, for example, rather opted for FaceTime. So for their kids using FaceTime to interact with their friends, because FaceTime is just FaceTime. It's not, it's not designed to make you want to do anything in particular, right? It's just a platform that you use kind of like Zoom is right now. And so I've heard from parents who've had their kids just use Zoom to connect with their friends. And, as Zoom is developing, it's also adding more and more features. There are filters now and, bunny ears that you can add if you wanted to during your Zoom call. So they're trying to make it a little bit more fun, a little bit more engaging. And so that might be a platform that's a better option. So I think these are some of the topics that we can engage our kids in, again, starting from very early on. And so again, I have colleagues in the space who have kids of their own, who they started talking to them about these topics when they were quite little, when they were maybe kind of 3, 4, 5 years old, to really try and engage them in these conversations around, why do you feel like you just want to stay on that platform? Why do you feel like you need to just one more video, just 5 more minutes, just one more little thing? All of it is down to our brain chemistry and to the way that we're built, to the way we're built to seek rewards, to seek stimulation, to seek relationships, to seek connection, to seek information, to satisfy curiosity, to satisfy our love of learning. All of these things are perfectly normal. There's nothing wrong with these kind of, let's call them urges. It's just that the way they play out on these tech platforms can be positive, but oftentimes it's kind of a little bit of a slippery slope. And so it can slide into some very negative tech habits and really leave us feeling kind of depleted and incredibly negative. And so I think, again, within that FOMO conversation, bringing that topic back of how does it make you feel and how do you actually want to feel as a result of this, and if social connection is what you're seeking, what are all the different ways in which we can get it? Again, because tech has become so deeply seamlessly integrated, I think a lot of us have forgotten that there's more way than one to get groceries, and there's more way than just one to speak to a person, and there's more way than one to find your way around a new town. So for example, one of the things that I try to do here, I love Google Maps, but I'm trying not to use it.
Oh,
I'm trying to use my, because again, as human beings, one of the things that we're also wired for is to kind of in the physical world discover and roam around, be very adventurous and be very curious and kind of orient ourselves to our physical environment. And relying too heavily on things like, for example, Google Maps overall just kind of lessens that ability to do that, because you really are, again, you're outsourcing yet another part of your brain to that tech. I catch myself doing it all of the time. And then, sometimes I'll remember and remind myself and go, no, 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 I know what direction I'm going in. It's fine. I can find it on my own. And also, the more that we engage directly with our environment and with each other, the more that we get that dopamine release from those activities as well. That's the thing. Dopamine exists in our brain one way or another. It's kind of our job almost at this point in this modern world to make sure that we kind of pair the dopamine release up with some of these more healthier, nourishing, nurturing experiences that are really a direct experience of the environment, a direct experience of another person, a direct experience even of ourselves. The quantified self is another perhaps too complex topic to talk about now, but it's another really interesting field within digital wellness. The fact that we're quantifying everything about ourselves, the steps we take and the calories we consume and how much water we drink and so many different things. It gives us the perception that we're more connected to ourselves, but I really see it as an outsourcing of, again, that perception of ourselves, outsourcing it to the tech. So it's being able to almost kind of redirect those dopamine channels, so that we really get that reward from spending more time just in those direct experiences.
I want to get back to the slippery slope because I know that's something on a lot of moms' minds. We're in
Right.
this time where I know for my 13-year-old, prior to the pandemic, he had a few friends that were girls that were on FaceTime. They were the only ones that had phones, and he felt
Mhm.
I could see the joy, the spark of I have a social life. I can talk to my friends.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic happened, and more kids got online. And so I found that girls typically are on FaceTime. They like face to face. The boys are enjoying something, that socialization over a video game where they
Mhm.
can talk, they can do something, they can build something, they can visit each other's towns. I know in Minecraft, my son has a town that he's built, and then his friend who moved to Europe has a European town that looks super cute and
Oh,
it
wow.
looks so European. And so they visit each
Right.
other's towns. And so there's a lot of joy and spark in those social interactions.
Mhm.
And they are online so much now. And I know even one of his friends is 100% distance learning. So he's like, at
Right.
least I get to talk to him. At least I get to,
Mm.
have that connection that they miss so
Yeah.
much. And
Yeah.
we are not in person as much with our friends.
Mm. Mm.
So how do we
Mm.
manage that slippery slope? Because I see it. I see the
Yeah.
slope sliding very quickly. There's that need. And so,
Yeah.
how, as a parent,
Yeah.
do we put that in perspective of today's world?
Mm. I think one thing is definitely to remember, and again, I mentioned that yesterday in this conversation that I had with these high school seniors, to remember that we were also teenagers once, and I know that I definitely had that experience of coming back from school, maybe having some food, and then immediately getting on the phone with my best friend and spending, I don't know, the next 2 hours maybe talking to her. And then, of course, one of my parents knocking on the door and going, "You just saw her. You just spent the whole day together." And in that moment, it was, I didn't probably explicitly think this, but it was kind of like, I don't know what words to use to explain to you how important this is to me
Mm.
and how just viscerally important this connection is right now. And I'm still in touch with my best friend from high school. So it's a connection that doesn't really go away. It is the most important thing to you, in that moment. And like you said, when your son was excited about having a social life, in translation, what that means is I matter. I'm
Mhm.
important. That's why it hurts to be excluded. And that's why
Mm.
it hurts to be kind of put to the side and to even explicitly kind of be rejected. We feel that we matter when we become kind of enclosed and cushioned into some kind of a social circle. It doesn't matter how big or small it is or what kind of circle it is, but we feel like we matter and we feel like we're important and we feel like somebody else sees us and recognizes us and acknowledges us and kind of gives us a like, to use modern day terms, but gives us a thumbs up. So that is really, really important. One of the concepts that I like to share with parents that, again, is quite popular in the area of digital wellness is to think about these interactions in the way that we think about food as well, and the ways in which we kind of categorize food. So, we can look at it as, great, amazing, really healthy food. We can look at the middle ground, which is kind of like, okay, sometimes we have this, but, not too often. And then we look at the red zone where we think, okay, we don't have this. We never ever have this because whatever happens to be as a family, as an individual, these are values and we don't go in that direction. So thinking about children's tech use and even our own tech use from that perspective, I think can make it a lot easier to categorize things. And so as children are more isolated, some of them are 100% isolated. Again, it depends on not just where in the US you are right now, but really on the planet. The conditions are very different. But looking at, kids' needs, probably the main one will be that social connection. Of course, the need to learn is another very, very big one. But look at the different ways in which they're satisfying these needs through their tech. Again, have this be more of a kind of conversation with them and see if you can kind of categorize it in those three kind of categories. So, what are the green light kinds of interactions that are really great and that you enjoy? They're not harmful to you in any way. They don't kind of tarnish your psychological and emotional well-being. You feel great at the end of it. You have learned something new, or you feel inspired, or you feel energized. Whatever it is. What are the ones that are kind of in the middle? So that might be watching YouTube videos. So that could be, it's not perfect to be on there 20 hours a day. It's not the healthiest, but we can do it sometimes. So let's see when we do it and for how long. And also co-view, by the way, as much as possible. I think that's really important for parents to kind of get in the habit of doing, especially when children are younger. And then look at, okay, what are we going to kind of put in that red zone? What are some of the things for the parents who are watching us? Maybe your kids don't engage in any kind of red zone activities, and that's great. But if there are some that you really feel like, okay, we really don't want to be doing this, either because of how your child ends up feeling or behaving at the end of it, whatever the reason is, let's agree to at least maybe pick one activity together that we're just going to leave in that zone and we're not going to engage in that. And so, the example that you gave of how your son plays with his friend who is in Europe, it's a very tech-based activity. I'm sure they spend a lot of time doing that and, building those cities, building those environments. But I would say that that could probably, again, unless they're spending all day long doing it and waking up at 4 in the morning to do it, that could probably go into the green zone because they're satisfying so many of these really kind of important and really beautiful developmental needs that they have that are very much age appropriate, and they're getting to learn and they're getting to socialize and they're in a way getting to be exposed to different cultures, which then might get them thinking about, oh, I want to learn more about Paris, or I want to learn more about Milan, or I want to learn more about what they eat in Belgium and what flowers grow in Holland, or whatever the case may be. So it really takes, since your son likes to tick boxes, it takes a lot of different boxes, and it satisfies a lot of those different, very much developmentally appropriate needs. So I think that's one way of thinking about it. That doesn't mean that we're not going to slide down that very slippery slope. Sometimes we will. I think we're much better off just kind of accepting the fact that we will slide off every once in a while, as opposed to going, we're not allowed to slide off ever. We must not slide off because that will just be the worst thing that could ever happen. I think it's important to keep in mind that it happens. When it comes to pornography, that's a whole other
Mhm.
topic, but children unfortunately are coming across pornography at a
Definitely.
much earlier age than ever before. In the UK, I think the average is about 8 years old when they first encounter it. So I think it's much better to be prepared, and the way to be prepared is to keep in mind that this will happen, but this is how we'll handle it once it does happen, and this is how we're going to talk about it. And I think that that kind of red, yellow, green zone can be a nice orienting point that we can use in a nice way that we can engage in those conversations and say, okay, if we see any very disturbing, very inappropriate content, that's definitely in that red zone. And let's definitely talk about it when that happens and see what we can do about it. Yeah.
What about with time, the slippery slope with time?
Yeah.
If they start spending more and more time, because as we were
Mhm.
saying, as teens, we're like 2 hours, that's hardly anything.
Exactly.
How do we bring them back up the slope with that?
Yeah.
How would you suggest, or maybe, I don't know if you want to talk about how to set healthy habits from the very beginning, if that's a
Mhm.
way to do it?
Right. I mean, the earlier the better, the sooner the better, for sure. I think when kids are very young, part of this comes from parents modeling that kind of behavior. So some of the things that we were talking about before in terms of verbalizing to them what you're doing, kind of how long you're doing it for, why you're doing it. When they engage with technology when they're very little, also talking in terms of, okay, let's spend 10 minutes, but really 10 minutes, because that also happens often, and I see that with some of my parent friends too. Okay, in 2 minutes you're going to have to stop, and then 10 minutes go past. Okay, in 5 minutes I will come, and then 20 minutes pass. Okay, you only have, didn't I tell you only have 2 more minutes left? And so then and then we don't really help ourselves as the parents.
That's
But
us 20 minutes later because we're doing something that we need
exactly.
to do.
Yes. We're either in a conversation ourselves that we really would much rather carry on with, or whatever the case may be. But it's important from that very early age, I think, to verbalize the amount of time that's being spent, because what that means to the child is, oh, this is important. Mom or dad keep bringing it up, so I should probably remember it. And then they will internalize that, like they internalize everything, and they will be used to thinking about their tech use in terms of how much time am I spending. I think, again, when you're talking about kind of young teens or older teens, especially when you're talking about COVID, when many of them have been cooped up, again, depending on parts of the world that you're in right now. If you're somewhere where it's snowing, or it's cold, or it's miserable, they're unlikely to be venturing out, so they're probably going to be staying indoors again for a little bit longer. Again, remembering the amount of time that we would spend on the phone with our friends, I think it's important to have that little bit of compassion, and to not think that the world's going to end if they do end up spending a little bit longer on whatever that particular platform is, but to definitely keep having conversations around that. Because if they really are using it to connect with their friends, and they really, again, once they're done with it, they really do feel like, we connected and it was wonderful and I feel great, that's fantastic. If they end up experiencing bullying of any kind, or if they, because of the particular platform, they end up coming across content that's maybe not appropriate, or whatever the case may be, I think that ongoing conversation is really important there, to talk to them about how can we regulate this, and not just simply say, well, 3 hours is just too long. Because why is 3 hours too long, right? And your teen's going to ask you that. That's going to be
Mhm.
the first question. How do you know that's too much? And who told you, that that's too much? And what does too much even mean? Unfortunately, even in this digital wellness space, we don't quite have concrete answers to that yet, because it can vary and it won't be the same for everybody. And sometimes, again, some of the teens that I've spoken to will have instances in their home where they were very much the kind of outdoor, exploring, being in nature, spending a lot of time being bored and curious kind of child, whereas their sibling was the one who loved television and would just sit in front and watch shows and all these things. So even within a family, you'll have kids who are very different. So that's why the same rules don't necessarily apply even within one small household, let alone coming out and kind of making a statement to the global community of parents saying 3 hours on whatever it is way too much, right? We can't really say that. It just kind of boxes people in too much, and again, I think it causes unnecessary conflict. So I think it's, as with everything else that your teen does, it's just important to have an insight into what they're doing, and to have a sense of how they're doing. A parent, like you said earlier, I'm not a psychologist, I'm just a parent. You have the kind of access to your child that I could never have, regardless of, how many degrees I could have in psychology or anything else. You're there with them all the time. You can sense when something is off better than anybody else can. And so it comes down to that, whether it's technology, whether it's drinking, whether it's, their relationships, whether it's drugs, whether it's any of those things that we kind of worry about, whether it's how they eat and take care of themselves. It's always about just kind of observing them from the side. And if you sense that something is a little bit off, given that they are spending so much time online, it's very likely that something is off there, that something is happening there. And then in that case, it could be something like they're primarily using Instagram to connect with their friends, but because you can't really pick and mix, they also get a lot of this other content there that's either distressing to them or it's upsetting, offensive, whatever it might be. So then it could be talking about, okay, maybe even half an hour on Instagram is still going to be just as bad because you're going to be exposed to the same things. So should we think about using FaceTime or a phone call, or if you're able to meet each other in a socially distanced way to do that, or you can just simply change some of your habits on a platform like Instagram, for example. And there was a women's charity whose name unfortunately I forget now, but they did this little experiment some time back where they worked with a small group of teenage girls, and the only thing they asked them to change about how they kind of showed up on Instagram was just to add on to follow a few more women who do things that they find very inspirational. So it could be in the field of science, it could be dance, it could be makeup, it could be anything that they were interested in. And 2 weeks later, they went back and they spoke to these same girls, and they said, this was incredible. They said, we didn't know we could use social media in this way. We didn't know this was, what was available to us. We didn't know that we could do things like, find a NASA scientist and follow her and see what she's doing, or, tap into what this actress is doing, or what Jane Goodall is doing, or Michelle Obama, or whoever it is who really inspires them. So sometimes even that kind of relatively small tweak can make a really big difference for how your teen experiences social media and the platform which they're on. So it doesn't even have to be the whole limiting, taking away, reducing, minimizing. Sometimes it can actually be an amplification, but really it's an application of the good. It's an application of the positive. So that dialogue with them and kind of maintaining that communication and that connection plays a really big role when it comes to these kinds of things.
I experienced that with my 13-year-old. This is kind of interesting. I asked him, do you think other young people use YouTube like you do? And I asked him that because I noticed that he was telling me all these really interesting facts. He
Mm,
was using it as like an Encyclopedia Britannica.
right, right,
And I was really impressed. I was like, this is the new modern Encyclopedia Britannica.
right.
And I said, so this is very interesting. I love how you're
Mhm,
using this. And he said, yeah,
mhm.
it just shows me all these videos because I've
Yeah.
watched these things to learn. It shows me all
Mhm,
these learning videos.
mhm.
And so I was thinking about that, how a lot of parents think, okay, limiting but and I'm only suggesting this from my experience,
Right.
if you can suggest, like you were saying, to your child as when they're young,
Mhm.
to pose questions,
Yeah.
to their teachers, to adults, and
Yeah.
also the internet. And if you
Yeah.
pose those questions, it will show up. The algorithm will help you. It will actually help you to
Yeah.
teach your child. And then it becomes such a learning tool
Mhm.
that their homepage is filled up with a library of good.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so to me, it
Yeah.
can be the slippery slope upward or
Mhm.
to positivity with a
Yeah.
learning tool. And it's
Yeah.
not necessarily evil, but I think it's the fact that I'm very immersed in the digital world because
Yeah.
I teach through digital and I do a lot of things through
Right.
digital. And
Mhm.
so I'll sit down with my children and I'll say, okay, I want to play Minecraft. I want to see what parents are saying is evil.
Yeah.
And then I want to, and then I talk to them about the trends. I'm like, what's trending on TikTok? What's trending on YouTube?
Yeah.
What's trending?
Yeah.
And then I'll look at it and I'll share the things that I find that are funny. Then they'll share the
Mhm.
things that they find are funny.
Mhm.
So it's not such a private, this is my private
Exactly.
time. It's more like it's a conversation in the
Right.
family. where we can talk about what's happening in our worlds, but it's a shared world. It becomes more of a
Hmm.
shared world, and
Exactly.
the conversation is open.
We are being influenced, and our behavior, our decisions, our opinions are also being influenced. And I
Yes.
think that's probably the most important reason why we need to gain control over how we're using all of this tech and how we're interacting with it. And like you said, to really make decisions around what are the things that I do want to be a part of, and what are the ways in which I want to use all of these different things. And I think that's kind of the plus side of these algorithms, like you were mentioning earlier with your son's YouTube. The reason why he gets the kinds of recommendations that he does is because of a lot of the searches that he put in early on. Now, YouTube may still show him every once in a while other videos that he may need to kind of filter through, and again, be very conscious in terms of what he's choosing. But that's kind of the positive side of the algorithms, is that we do have a certain amount of power over them. The way we behave online will also impact what we end up seeing online and what ends up kind of showing up, depending on our search terms, depending on what we click on, what we like, what we don't like, the types of videos that we view, the types of people that we follow, the type of content that we engage with. And so, for example, I try to be very conscious of the search terms that I enter into Google. And so, for example, a few months ago, there was yet another kind of conspiracy theory that came up about, it was probably something to do with COVID. And I was very curious about it because I really wanted to know where it was coming from, like who made this up and who put it together. And I opened up, the Google tab, and I went, I don't want to put this in, because we have this awareness now of the fact that it's not just me by myself in this vacuum, in this kind of empty space entering a search term. That's not how it works. There's a whole kind of cascade of events, of digital events, that happen once I've entered that search term. And one of the most mind-blowing things for me from the film The Social Dilemma, I don't know how many people have gotten to see it on Netflix, was the fact that the results that you get from your Google search are not going to be the same for you as they are for me, as they are going to be for somebody who's somewhere in Europe, or somewhere in South America, or somewhere in Russia, or wherever. That's one of the most mind-boggling things for me, and one of the reasons why I'm such a huge advocate of digital wellness and responsible tech design, responsible tech consumption. I think the people creating the tech have a huge responsibility. I think we as consumers have a huge amount of responsibility to really kind of get with it, and to really learn more about all of these things, about how the tech is designed, about what happens when we interact with it. Because again, none of this happens in a vacuum. And again, when it comes to children, what I've again found is that we underestimate how much of this they can understand. They're also much more tech savvy than we are, first of all, so there's that. But they're able to comprehend a lot of this. And for kind of sort of younger teens, older teens in particular, they have that very pronounced sense of justice, of what is wrong and what is right. And they really don't like it when someone's trying to trick them into or out of something. And so I find that it's a great age to be talking to them about some of these ways in which tech kind of tries to be a little bit sneaky and tries to influence our behavior, because that will trigger that little sensor, the little justice sensor in their minds. I think these younger generations in particular really have a heightened sense of that, and it will help them be more mindful in terms of how they interact online. It will get them thinking twice about, do I want to enter this search term, because what could that potentially mean in terms of the news I get, or the people that get recommended to me, the kind of content I see, and so on. So I think it's important that we understand that, yes, these algorithms are made by somebody else and they're incredibly powerful and influential, but there is a certain amount of power that we also have. We just have to really apply that power. We really have to proactively engage with this technology in order to kind of get out what we put in.
I think that being aware is super important. Actually, this show helping people to understand that your reality can be shaped by
Right.
the search terms,
Yeah.
because if
Yeah.
you had put in those search terms and wanted to see that conspiracy theory video,
Yeah.
then you will be flooded over the months and years with
Of
that,
course.
which will form this
Mhm.
idea that this is how the world is, because you're
Yeah.
seeing it
Yeah.
every day and you're
So
flooded.
maybe it's true.
Yeah, so you may think it's true, and there's this confirmation
Mhm.
bias that happens when you think
Yeah.
something's true, and then you get that confirmation from all the flood of videos you're seeing, and you're like, well, how come nobody else is understanding that this conspiracy theory is actually real? They wouldn't call it that, but
Right.
because
Right.
their YouTube home screen and suggested
Mhm.
videos are not full of that particular search term. And
Right.
so the our realities are being shaped
Mm.
by what we're looking at and what we search for in such a huge way,
Yeah.
which it's a whole nother topic of talking about the polarization
I
of how it
know.
is with the country and all of that. But for the sake of our children, I think, like you were saying, explaining to our children that's what we'll get and how to hack that in a sense.
I think that's basically it. The way I define being digitally well is that it means using technology mindfully and intentionally and humanely in such a way that it doesn't tarnish your psychological and emotional well-being or the psychological and emotional well-being of other people. And so I think if we use that as a guiding principle, both in terms of how we're using tech as adults and then guiding our children to really learn how to use tech in the same way, we're really going to set them up for success when it comes to managing their tech better. Again, it's always a slippery slope. There's always that risk of slipping into habits that are not that great, but that is where we're really trying to battle with some of this tech design and trying to overcome it and trying to work with just some of the inherent kind of, I don't want to call them limitations that we have, but we tend to get distracted easily and we tend to get carried away as human beings and we daydream and we lose focus. It's inherently who we are. But I think, like you said, raising awareness is a huge component of this, understanding that tech use has both a psychological and an emotional impact on us, and understanding that the way we use tech also impacts other people. I think that's a huge component as well. So to really be mindful in terms of how we show up online and how we interact with others. And again, not underestimating our kids. I would say that in conclusion as well. They get a lot of these things in ways in which we really wouldn't expect them to, but they definitely do.
Well, thank you so much. This is really awesome. So where are you zooming off to now?
So it's maybe a predictable answer given where we are, but I think I'll probably zoom off to the beach and maybe have my lunch there, just because I can, and it's Hawaii.
Of course, now that you're here, you might as well enjoy it.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angeline.
And here's how you can connect with Teodora. And don't forget to stay till the end to see our Valentine's Day Chinese New Year craft and recipe. And here's a sneak peek for next week.
Yeah, I mean, for these new generations, they need to tailor to kids' needs instead of trying to think for what would I want to do. They need to think, what would the new generation want to do, and how can we incorporate their advice and their feedback and whatever.
Okay, well, that is our show for this week. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you back here next week. For now, take care, stay safe, and be well. Aloha.